Yeah.
Ringing in my ear.
I'm dying. Karma is my cat. All right. I feel like that would be... So I know that she's talking about the cat sitting on her lap. I'm so sorry, y'all, that this is in the interview, but you're getting real dialogue because I never pulled down the curtain. I never unpulled down. It's always there. It's always down. I feel like Karma is my cat would be like a really dope line in a rap song because then it's a double entendre. But in a Taylor Swift song, it just sounds exactly like what it is. And I'm like, that's cool, but I have allergies. So
true.
This is if Karma is my cat, awful for me. Like,
yeah.
But I'm loved by a feline, I guess. Everyone, welcome to week 7 of Filter Through Skin. I am so glad to be in this space, in this time, featuring, interviewing the one, the only Britta B.
Yeah,
Miss Britta B.
Yeah,
you know me. The fact that you add that is always hilarious because I added that naturally one time, just like saying it. And I'm like, and I'm like, is that a thing that she does? Like, not know it, and now I know. But the
tag.
The tag. Can you imagine just like every time you got introducing Britta B, and then like from nowhere, just
it happens. It happens. It really does. Like if I'm slacking one day, somebody's got me.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. The exciting. So I've been saying this to all of you over the course of these weeks. For those of you who are part of the program and seeing this in the time that it is intended, you know that all of the poets who have come onto this program, I know in real life. I've known for a long time. I would say out of all the poets that have been a part of this program, I'd say I know Patrick Walters, David DeLisca, and Britta B the longest. It's been a long time of admiring Britta's work, of sitting under and learning from Britta's voice in a quite literal way, and admiring the pen game. I think here's my thing, right? I'm a fanboy of all my friends, but I'm also a fanboy in terms of craft and in terms of commitment. Britta B is just energetically probably the most prominent energy that I've ever met doing poetry. I don't know anybody who could step into Britta's lane and do Britta like Britta because Britta's Britta. Britta is that distinct. I'm gonna try not to say your name as much in congruence for the rest of those because I said it a lot.
Britta.
But I really do admire you. I really do look up to you as an artist outside of friendship. I really do look up to you as an artist in the way that you've committed to being so human in your work and allowing place for anger and allowing place for joy and allowing place for infatuation and allowing place for justice, allowing place for pondering and consideration. And the way that your work constantly pushes me to stay human is one of the most fundamental reasons I brought you in for this program, because this program is all about Black writers getting the opportunity to step outside of the monolith we are expected to perform in, expected to perform oppression, expected to perform pain, expected to perform Blackness in costume and never really be ourselves. And you've always, as long as I've listened to you over the last decade plus, probably at this point, you've always been so willing to be you and to sit in your actual feelings and share those feelings, regardless of what the climate around art looks like. And I've always appreciated that because it's allowed me to figure out what do I want to say, what really matters to me right now. And so just purely as an artist stepping out of the interviewer space, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the work you've done in our community, the people you've mentored. Some of the people who are a part of this program exited my mentorship to go into your mentorship, and to see their exponential growth has been really beautiful for me to watch. And so I'm thankful for that and to witness that. all of you can give, it's not a real-time applause, but wherever you are watching this in the future, I hope you're applauding, snaps and all, for the wonderful human being who is here to be interviewed. If you want to give yourself an opportunity to introduce yourself, please feel free to do that.
Oh, yo, Scribe, like, going on 22 minutes. I think you can make it 30-minute intro. No, thank you for those praises. Thank you for your finding your like shared experience with me. I think that, as Scribe's been saying, like, we've known each other and gotten to be in so many spaces and events together that it hasn't ever really been a question of like, it's nice to have someone in your realm that you don't have to question if they are, you don't have to question their vibe, is basically what it is. Because I think when we get into any sort of industry, any sort of community, quote unquote, it gets very difficult living in as big of a competitive city as it is to not be jaded and to not be pessimistic and to not be, what's the other word? There's a C word, like critical, I guess, of everything.
Yeah.
And Scribe, among with a couple other folks that he's mentioned, we have an unspoken thing going on. It would be cool to one day dissect what that unspoken thing is, but also I'm happy to like just let it ride and let it be its thing, because it's doing what it needs to, and we all are blossoming and flourishing from it. For those of you who don't know me, I am Britta, aka Britta B. Yeah, you know me. And I just want to jump into this interview because if there's any way to know me, it's basically to be around me and ask questions. But it's gonna be Scribe and I having a good chat today, and this is like one of our sacred spaces. So you are getting a chance to, of course, learn a little bit more about Scribe and myself, but you're getting a chance to witness like two artists hold sacred space when like usually the rest of the world doesn't get a chance to have this. So enjoy.
Most deaf. All right, let's get into it. So out of all the poets I've had the pleasure of interviewing, I believe you're the only one who's had a body of work professionally published by a publishing house in this program. And
yeah, show it off.
Yes, Wires That Sputter by Britta Badour is I had the opportunity to be there when you had the release at the ROM, and the thing that most people from our side of the tracks in terms of spoken word poetry don't tend to dive into is the page.
For real, how bored were you?
Yo, so look, if this ever spawns in public, it's not a diss thing.
It's not a diss thing.
I came off like probably one of the worst days of 2023. I was coming out from like some of the worst news I could have gotten this year, and I'm like, yo, some poetry is really gonna make me feel better. I had a spliff outside the library. And so now outside the library, outside the museum, and I come in, I'm like, this is going to be great. And then I sit down, I'm standing up, and I'm like,
what's going on?
Where are the words?
Yo.
And why are they gray in the air? and so I had to really force myself to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, in this really grandiose space, being like, the voices are boring the hell out of me. But like, there's some interesting things being said, like some really cool metaphors and stuff. But I felt like the bridge between the voice and the word was kind of lost. And then you stepped on stage. And for a minute, I'm like, there's no way that Britta's going to be reserved right now. Like, I understand she might dial back a little bit. But like, I know I'm not going to be bored listening to Britta, right? You step on stage and you're like, And then you're like, Toronto, like, thank you, Jesus.
She said my name.
And like the room, it was like the room woke up. It was so nice. I think I was talking to my friends who I was there with, and it was a breath of literally fresh air. It felt like when you open the window and a cool breeze hits you, or the cold air hits you to wake you up from the lull of the hot AC. And it was so nice. But then I really got the opportunity to listen. Because I'm used to being in spoken word spaces and listening to people, being able to use their voices as an over amplification for what may or may not be lacking on the page, right? But listening to this, I'm like, this is chock full of substance down to the word. And I really appreciated that even on the page, your work allowed for your voice to come out. I could read the work. I think if you were to cut the curtain, like put a curtain down and blanket your voice, and I were to pick up the book, I wouldn't feel like, does this person know what they sound like? Does this person know what their work reads like? And like, I'm still looking for the opportunity to like read it in full. I'm very slow on my reading list.
Me too.
But the beauty of seeing the words on page and hearing the words and being able to say that these two are distinctly the same and present in that form. I guess I want to ask you, when you started developing your identity as a writer, primarily, not as a spoken word artist, but as a writer, where did that journey start for you?
When I started writing, it was because I heard something in my head be like, you got to write this down. You got to write this down. And I was feeling something that I wasn't able to vocalize. And maybe that was to a friend or to a parent. But I remember distinctly feeling like I'm not able to say it with my voice, so I have to put it into words on the page. And then that feeling, that was something when I was like 5, 6 years old. So that feeling was something I always knew was only within me. Like nobody could tell me to write. Nobody could tell me how to write, what to say, what to think about, what to like dream of in my writing. That was my place where only I could decide what that would be. And even in that decision, it's really hard because you're trying to get a thought down on a page. You're trying to catch this feeling as quick as you can. So it doesn't always work. It's not always the way you envision it. Like if you're a painter, for instance, you have a vision in your head and you want to paint that vision, your skills aren't always up to par with how to create that picture or paint that portrait, right? So I knew there was something where I needed to, maybe I didn't know the word grow, but I needed to do it differently to be able to really pull out this thing I was feeling. And a lot of it was just like me not feeling like I could tell the truth about things. So for good and for not so good, I became like centered on trying to tell the truth. Like what is the truth? Like how come no one's talking about it? And as you get older, your memories and your experiences become impacted by other people's memories and experiences. So then what is truth anyway? And you have to, I've had to figure out if I want to stay stuck on telling the truth exactly as how I felt it was, or do I want to explore more what truth can be? Do I want to explore more what is the point of the truth? Like what if I tell you something that is happening in my writing, what does that do for you as a reader or as an audience? Is that the thing I want to make happen? So there's a lot of questions around, even once you get to the space of knowing why you write, what is the point of doing what you do in your writing?
Mm-hmm.
What is the meaning of that in this time right now?
It's bars. Facts and facts. So you're giving me a lot of game. I'm thinking about the roots of like, so you being a child and finding that truth had to come out in that space. Truth had to come out in the space that was writing, that was the page. Something I feel as poets, as we enter this, as we exist in this media age where everything is so visual focused and it's kind of curated to an auditory and visual experience. And someone described reading to me once as looking at words on a page and vividly hallucinating. And I feel like that's true because I remember when I read a lot as a kid as a way to kind of escape my circumstance. And I used to like vividly hallucinate Hogwarts as I was reading Harry Potter, you know, when I started reading The Inheritance Cycle by, let me look at his name because I can't remember it. I think it's Eric Paolini or Paolini. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's still on my bookshelf though. And I read about this magical place called Allegasia and about dragons and elves and dwarves and human warriors and all of that stuff. And the world kind of came alive to me. With poetry, as I've read poetry, so many times I struggle, or so many times in my earlier years, really being invested in poetry, I struggled with seeing the world kind of come alive through words alone. And I think it's because I spent a lot of time trying to make things deeper than they were, or feeling like people made things deeper than they were. And truth, I found, which is what I'm leading to with this question, truth is what I find is always the most explainable thing. One of my favorite collections of poetry is A People's History of Chicago. And it was one of the first ones I read where I was it's because it was simpler. There was no deeper meaning for me to find other than the history that was being told. But it brought me to life. But it also started teaching me a way that like you can look at language as a bounce around, as an echolocator almost. So how would you say you describe, before we get into ways to explore style on your own, how would you say you describe your writing style? If you were to vividly hallucinate it, what would you describe it as your way of navigating your content or the content of your work?
My writing style tends to be, okay, well, it used to be I'll wait until I have a line in my head that needs to be built from. So almost like a hook or a lyric that I want to expand on. And now I have just in the last year, I mean, it took a few years to get to last year, but in the last year, I've been able to open something within myself to look at a blank page and like pour. So I'm not waiting for a line anymore. It's now craft because I can make a world, a universe, a time, or an event out of any blank space. There's practice to that. It's almost the same as what I'm playing around with right now is like believing in yourself. Some people wake up and it's natural to them. They believe in themselves. They have that thing. Some people, like me, have to work at it every day. There's something I have to do to remind myself of that thing that I hold, that I hold, and that's my magic, or that's my infallible me. Like no one can take that away. Sure, I will feel all of the feelings, but I will never not believe in myself. And that's a ritual, that's a practice. So if we are able to practice anything that we I guess desire. The thing about desire is like sometimes we get into the system of comparing our desires to others. But what's so crazy about that for me is like, if I get jealous or if I get tempted or if I feel like I'm lacking in comparison to anyone else, that's just a template of something that I want. So now I have just learned, oh, okay, this is a new thing that I want to acquire to get. And if I find out along the way, oh, actually, I don't really care about this thing, then whatever. Who cares? There's no reason to like stay stuck in a feeling if it is not getting you to that desire or that place that you wish to be. And even in like, if I come back to this blank page thing, is like, all right, I want to see what I can do. That's it. I'm not like gonna make myself say, okay, I have to write a banger, or I have to write some good shit, or I have to like make something that makes people feel this thing. I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna see what I can do, and let it be. Like, or not let it be, but like let that thing, wherever it is, because we're always chasing it in this, like, for me, like I'm chasing some like sounds, I'm chasing some language, I'm chasing something I don't even know yet, or something that sounds like something else and it's tricking me and I'm saying this other thing, but I gotta bring that, filter it, and be the vessel to put it there on the canvas. So the writing process is like what I'm practicing, just being an experiment for language. And then when I come back to it to revise or edit it, then I will go into my practice of what is it that I wish this could be. But I have all these skeletons now that I can puppeteer and build muscle or give skin to.
I like that. I really appreciate the separation that you mentioned of initializing the process of a blank page, and also including that you really enjoyed the transition between, or not that you enjoyed, but that you had the transition between one, having something come to you, and then deciding to just place whatever you had down. Yeah. I think that's important places to transition from, because one, I believe, is inspiration that we can't really explain or provide is reactionary. And then one is really trusting the reactionary version of you that creates in response, to allow it to transition into the part of you that can create from being.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate highlighting those two different sources of creation. So thank you for that. And then from there, even further highlighting that the editing process does not have to be a part of that initial creation. That there are separate processes is a big deal. So starting, for me, what I'm going to take forward from this interview at this time is start from a place of pouring. What do I feel? Who do I want to be? What is it I want to say at this time, without expectation? But truly coming from a place of being and expression and creation, and starting from there, and then allowing myself to develop out of that feeling into something that I believe can be directed, whether I want it to be directed and edited for myself or directed and edited for other people. That is a secondary creation process. And so I like that a lot. Can you take me through, and this is how you want to answer this is entirely up to you, developing a writing style versus a performance style is such a distinct process, I think. And they're distinctly different processes because the tools you have are all accessible through, when I think of the spoken word, when I think of rap, for me especially, my voice is such a versatile tool. I can be laid back, I can be energetic, I can be aggressive, I can be soft. Words, I think, and I include this in my rap style, but as I was saying, they're distinct processes. I write my words with the intention that if they were never said, you could still read them and pull the intention from the word. That words themselves have feeling.
Do you want the attention regardless, or do you want the tone regardless? Because you're talking about voice. do you want people to be able to flow the way you are coming to it?
That's a great question. I think the flow is less important than the world I build visually.
The meaning?
Mm-hmm. The meaning and the story.
Yeah.
And so if I'm rapping about rap, that doesn't really apply. But there's a song, and I'll tell you more about this in like a side conversation. Maybe not. There's a song I'm putting it out called Dabbling.
Okay.
And the song's just about what love looks like in different times. And there's a period of like my wife and I on our honeymoon, and then what our love looks like 5 years down the road, or nearly 5 years down the road with now a kid, and like our Saturday mornings don't look like waking up in Greece anymore. They look like waking up and going to the farmer's market. And so...
Which is still beautiful.
Which is still beautiful. And so painting the two distinct beauties in those, I think you can find them outside of my tone of voice. So my question for you is, what do you do to direct your readers towards tone and feeling?
Yeah, I think you look at the page and, I mean, nobody knows how I read yet. Nobody comes to my book. No, not everyone comes to my book knowing my voice. So let's say for everyone who's new to me, their first exposure to my work in the first piece of the collection, I'm messing with what traditional poetry looks like. You know, it's usually left aligned and it has broken lines, like it's the lines are in fragments. You don't see them in like sentence or paragraph format. And in my first piece, we have more of what may appear as a paragraph. It's in a prose block, but then I'm messing with punctuation, and you have to, as a reader, figure out what does this punctuation mean in relation to the content or the text. So at least right there, even if you don't have any of those answers, you know, I'm not going to give you a poem whose voice is not gonna be like defamiliarized. We're so familiar with how poetry's supposed to look. I'm not going to, even if you see a familiar poem, you're not going to get. I'm hopefully preparing you to not feel like the way you usually see a poem is also how you usually hear a poem. So hopefully by the time you get to something like that in the collection, you'll know that I'm not speaking that way. I'm not, my rhythm is different because I'm messing you so much in the first piece, and then we go into more like fragmented, explosive, like playing with pronunciation of language. Even you're gonna hopefully just gather that I'm really stretching the voice here of what you know about voice. So when I think your question was like, how do you distinguish your voice? Was it distinguish your voice on page?
Yeah.
Like, do that? Yeah, I think punctuation is huge for me. I actually have a hard time playing with punctuation. So with what rules that I know in English grammar, how can I make that my graffiti? Or how can I make that my way of entering the cipher? Like, it's not ever going to be a period is the end of a sentence for me. It's got to be symbolic to something. So it's symbolic to how I use my voice to promote rhythm, because I'm so fascinated with music. And like you said earlier, like I express my infatuations. Music is probably one of the biggest elements to the way that I speak and write in my poetry. So how can I get that to be an aesthetic on page is something.
Word. Let's dive into that. An aesthetic on page. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I like the idea of an aesthetic on page because it emboldens the idea that there is a look that you can create. on a page, which is something that is, I think, unique to page poetry, that you don't just form the words, you form the look, the appearance.
Yeah.
So can you tell me,
like fashion?
Like fashion.
Fashion show with no fashions.
What is developing an aesthetic? If you were to give not a beginner, but someone who loves poetry and is looking to form more visual and visceral displays on the page, what would you offer up to a younger poet, a younger Black poet especially, for encouragement in developing that?
Well, I mean, it's gonna be different for everyone, and everyone could write. We have 5 people write the same poem, but it's gonna be different aesthetically for every one of them, I would hope, because I'm hoping that those 5 people have different different bookshelves. So you want to use your little library, and this can be books, this can be texts, this can be coffee table picture books, this can be musics on Spotify, this can be but it's whoever you are studying. You have to be in study to be in reference, because all of your work is in reference to a conversation that's already been had anyway. But how are you positioning yourself? So what is your little library of the stuff you are influenced and inspired by? Collect that, write it down, make like 20 different artists or people or authors or whatever that you feel inspired by, and then look at how their work looks and take that as a template to now play with that one poem that everybody else has. Your voice is going to come up through that. Like, I can think, like, let's take okay, random, but let's take Sweet Bitters by Jadena. Let's take a Patricia Smith poem on like Motown era. Let's take a album cover of Aretha Franklin, an album cover. Okay, that's not even just what it looks like. And let's take a writer's guide to poetry, like as a text even. I take all of these things and I pull out what is something illuminating, just something that is illuminating from each of these 4 things. And then I'm like, how can I mimic that? That's hip hop. That's hip hop. You emulate, and then you find your natural sense of style and being in that emulation.
Yeah. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I hope all of you were able to take from this that there's so much growth we can do on paper or on the digital world, depending on who you is, and that there's so much to be explored in the format that is words. Ultimately, that is where we draw our power. I think there's so much to be said about what can be said, but there's so much more that can be said within the unsaid, or within the within the said outside of the voice, within the said, given its immediate structure. And human beings invented writing for a reason, not just for simplicity, but also for access. And I believe there's so much you can access simply by looking at the word and letting it be brought to life. Britta, thank you so much for your time and your energy. I appreciate you, and I look forward to the workshops. See you then.
Bless up. Thank you.
No worries.